Postal Service is next on the cutting block. The vaccine program. They're putting vaccine.
The Weather Service.
Isn't that as evil as anything can be?
FEMA.
Yes, USA. Aid to the poor people in the world. Yeah, they cut down. So if you're rich, you can put your thumb down, but there are a lot of people.
The only way we will win this, the only way we will win is if we get millions of people on the streets like they did in Turkey. That is the only way this is going to happen. We can't be apathetic. We cannot be indifferent. We are now officially an authoritarian government. Our democracy is officially gone.
True.
And they're taking down our education system, our Social Security, our VA services. I know that.
It's my damn right to steal your money through Social Security, and if you don't give me your damn money, kids, then it's an authoritarian Nazi dictatorship. It's good morning. I'm Austin Boomer Peterson. My father, he fought in WW2. I skipped Vietnam, but now I'm going to tell you kids what I'm going to do with your money. And you're going to sit back and like it. If you don't let me take every single penny you have and every freedom you have, kids, well, then it's an authoritarian dictatorship. Good morning, Pineapples. Welcome to the Wake Up America Show. I'm Austin Peterson. We're glad to see Brad Beckman here, Quest Fanning, Dad Bod Baboon, Floby Tenderson, Quantum Kitty. Have you ever heard of the double slit experiment? Ask Quantum Kitty about that. Joni Rankin, Andy Opperman, Floby Flo, Barney Styles. What's up, people? Looking very good and very nice. We're glad to have all of our friends joining us live this morning, including Mongoose87. Have you hit the like button yet? When you're a super fan, you know when you enter the show, you click the like button. Help us to get out there in more people's feeds. And follow as well. Amy J. Ease, what's up? Many people across the country are starting to note that when they're driving past these Tesla protests, not one person under 50 was present. Another described a protest at a Tesla service center with about 60 participants, mostly elderly, focusing on concerns like Social Security and Medicare. One post from one user on X estimated the average age of a post from this is from Georgia, highlighted the protesters as 50 to 70 white folks, mostly older. And they had tambourines and bongo drums. Several users estimated the average age of protesters. One claimed the average Tesla protester age is 75. I'm sorry, squeeze me. While another suggested 75% or more were over 60, describing them as boomer libs, alongside a smaller, younger turbo libtards. Turbo libtards, that's a good one. The demographic, very old, very, very elderly. And you can see from this protest here kind of what we're talking about.
No longer get medical care because they shut it all down.
Oh my God, they're... Oh, deport Elon Musk.
Medicaid. He's taking away our education.
So you are okay with deporting people who have visas or people who became American citizens? Okay, good to know. So that, and I'm glad you won't show that outrage when Trump does it, right? Welcome to the Wake Up America show. The left still defacing Tesla vehicles, still not learning their lessons, many of them committing felonies here. You can see the native turbo libturd. Is this a turbo libturd? Do you have to be young to be a turbo libturd? Or is this just your average boomer libturd? Here we have them with his keys. And, you know, I got to wonder if old Chengdu Quang Mai here was aware when he whipped out his keys and decided to key a Tesla there. I wonder if he remembered. Now, he looks a little feeble here, a little bit frail. Did he remember that, one, it's an electric vehicle, and 10 years ago, they were all telling us to buy these electric vehicles. So they were doing what you told them to do. Two, did you know that here you are right on camera, right, bending over, there's your face, right there, boom, there you go. You decided to key that Tesla a little bit, right, caused a little bit of property damage there. And looky here, you could tell from the flora in the background, likely to be California, of course. I need a Tesla. All my friends are getting Teslas. This is what we're seeing and hearing this morning from the boomer generation showing up at Tesla dealerships to protest. Now, Michelle, sir, she's got a name tag on. So would you imagine that Michelle here is an average protester here? Or is this more the type of thing that you would see with someone who's a pro?
Yeah, they're here, but you can hear all the horns honking for us, so we've got most of the support, but they were here all morning too. They're pro-Tesla. Well, good for them. They have a right to speak out, just like we do. So
Sure.
we're leaving each other alone. My job is to stand guard here at this side of the driveway to keep our sides apart. So I'm one of the peacemakers here and making sure everybody's safe and exercise our First Amendment right to peaceful assembly, be able to speak up against the policies of the government, the Trump administration, that are just not going against the majority of Americans with what we want and what we need. And people are really scared. They're scared, especially immigration, what's going on with that. I mean, the deportations without these people having any due process and no rights at all, and they're just scooped up and arrested and taken out of state and away from their families and don't even have any...
Why are these old white ladies so angry? I don't understand. Their entire lives, everything was given to them. Her generation inherited a strong nation and they squandered it. The greatest generation saved the world from fascism, and then they patched up Social Security in 1983, but boomers, now in charge, let it slide into insolvency. The trust fund will dry up within a decade without action. Boomers won't fix it, leaving younger retirees and future generations to suffer cuts or fend for ourselves. Good morning. Welcome to the Wake Up America Show. I'm your host, Austin Peterson. We've got some great guests for you today. We will have no John Miltimore today. He decided to take a little impromptu vacation with his family, and God bless him for that. Hope he enjoys it. Have a wonderful time. He'll be back next Monday. I have two incredible guests for you today in the second hour at 8 a.m. Central Time. We're going to speak to Hannah Cox about an online brouhaha between the Vice President, J.D. Vance, and a conservative writer from Red State who was warning Donald Trump about the potential dangers involved in continuing the trade wars, which might cause the financial insecurity that would cause people to vote Democrats in the next election. A reasonable concern, right? A reasonable concern. As you can see, the greediest generation is just waiting to get their tendrils back into power so that they can bleed all of us, the rest of us, dry, and in the name of protecting democracy. And so we need to be cautious about and look out for the red flags of the dangers of upcoming elections. I know Elon Musk is in Wisconsin, and he's out there stumping for the Supreme Court campaign out there. I've got some videos of Elon on the stage in Wisconsin wearing the cheese on his head. And hopefully I'll get to that before 8 a.m. But we're going to talk to Hannah Cox this morning at 8 a.m. Central Time a little bit about the J.D. Vance call out. So J.D. Vance called out the Red State writer for being a liberal, which is hilarious because J.D. Vance was attacking like a very conservative, noted conservative for being a conservative, not somebody who sounded like David French, but somebody who was arguing in favor of economic conservatism, which J.D. Vance was calling him a liberal over, which makes me just wonder what is J.D. Vance's game? I know he's a very intelligent person, but attacking someone for defending fiscal conservative principles or for being concerned about the economy because the economy hasn't recovered like we saw in Trump's first term with the roaring economy, that's not what we're seeing here. And there are some warning signs. No matter how popular Trump might be in polls can be fickle, and the real economic data is what matters. And we're going to talk to Hannah Cox about that this morning at 8 a.m. Central Time. Right? We don't want the turbo libtards, the actual liberals, to get back into power. So we need to listen to people who are warning about the fact that the people who came along in the last election, they aren't hardcore like we are, ideologues on the right. They aren't MAGA. They're just average, independent, many of them normie voters who are concerned about bread and butter issues. They're concerned about the economy. They're concerned about, making sure that they can afford to buy the goods and services that they need to take care of their families. So we're going to talk to Hannah Cox about that. And then at 8:30 a.m. Central, is the woke right a thing? Is it become mainstream? Many people have sort of been making fun of or attacking James Lindsay in recent months for calling some on the right the woke right. Not the woke right. So what does it mean to be woke right? Is it a real thing? What are they really trying to say? And why does James Lindsay, who is an atheist, former liberal, who was one of the biggest proponents of taking down wokeness, why is he calling some on the right woke? Is there an epistemological reason for this? We'll talk about that this morning at 8:30 a.m. in the second hour with Ian Howarth this morning. Yes. How on earth did we get Ian Howarth? It's the Wake Up America show. We've always got great guests. We've always got great topics. We've always got the best clips of what's happening in the world. When you watch the Wake Up America show 5 days a week, you're informed, you're ahead of the news before everybody else sees it on the legacy media, right? It doesn't matter, even if you are a boomer, then you will avoid the boomer mindset. I know many great boomer people who are not boomers in the sense that, yes, they might be a part of that generation, but they don't have that generational mindset. So I will invite those who are listening to the Wake Up America show to keep an open mind today and don't take offense just because I say things like, okay, boomers. I'm really talking about the mindset. Nathan joins us live on the show this morning. What's up, Quest? Thank you. Caleb Vanderfeld's asked questions like, anyone else slightly embarrassed by punching Trump's ticket after he blabbed about running for a third term over the weekend, or just me? It is quite cringe. I do have the clip. I do think he's trolling. I do think, again, not being focused on the economy and being focused on taking over Greenland and things like that, I think it is a bit of a distraction. So I wonder what you would think about that. You can send me a text. Oh my God, I haven't checked the texts all weekend, and I don't even know if I checked them on Friday either. I'm pretty sure I'm behind. Oh my God, yes, there's so many texts. Send us a text at 573-319-1586. That's 573-319-1586. That's the text line, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. And anytime that you send us a text at 573-319-1586. You might hear from me. You might hear from Stephanie. Either one. We both check the account, and you could talk to us directly. If you'd like to hear your thoughts read back on the show, then a Rumble rant is usually the best way to do so. Like Quest Fanning, who says there will be a temporary depressing effect on the economy when you hire even useless workers. Not quite sure what you're trying to say there, Quest, but I appreciate the effort. Love to hear your thoughts. Again, that text line, 573-319-1586 is the text line. The Tesla protests are AstroTurf, claims one article, the Fairfax County Times, in describing a protest in Tyson's Corner, that's in Fairfax, Virginia. I used to live really close to there. People over profits, recall Elon. They're saying, tell me what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like, right? These protests, right? But as the man juggled the anti-Elon sign, his bullhorn and a script he had there, pre-written chants were blowing everywhere. The AstroTurf nature of this multi-million-dollar professional protest industry has the footprints of two behemoth enterprises. right? A $12.6 million political nonprofit called the Indivisible Project, and of course, the Democratic Party. Whoopsie, right? Right? It underscores, of course, the partisan natures of these protests. Trump, Musk, screw veterans big time. Here we have a Vietnam veteran, member of the boomer generation. Again, boomer mindset, not just a generation, guys. It is a generation, yes. It is also a mindset. I have been called a boomer sometimes, for example. And so if you guys know what I'm talking about here, the boomer mindset, it is to be greedy, it is to eat your young, it is the devouring mother, it is the devouring father, it is those who say that if they cannot steal every penny from your pocket, of your hard-earned taxpayer dollars, of every penny that I earn from this show and my podcast network and from sales of Gulf of America merchandise and Founding Flavors coffee, every single cent that I earn, if I don't turn it over forcefully to the government, that's going to steal the majority of it and then give it back to this generation here, this person here, then it's a fascist authoritarian dictatorship. If you're not allowed to steal every single penny we have, Medicare and Medicaid, legacies of the 1960s, when this guy was in Vietnam, are spiraling out of control. They now eat up 40% of healthcare spending. Instead of reform, boomer politicians pushed the Affordable Care Act. They added debt to us. They added complexity. Then they dodged the third rail of entitlement reform, prioritizing their benefits over sustainability. What is wrong with these people? They hold $73 trillion. That's what boomers have in wealth. But they show little interest in passing it on to anyone but abortion clinics and casinos. And if that's funny, it shouldn't be. What are they doing? They're hitting the slot machine. They're taking their child's inheritance and they're going down to the slot machines, and instead of passing it on to their children, and in any way, shape, or form, they're either at the slots, right, or at the blackjack tables, spending every penny that they have. Fine, it's your own hard-earned money. It's a free country. So as long as it was something that you earned, if it's not a welfare benefit, right, then okay, fine. But that doesn't change the fact that the virtue is devoid, that the act itself is devoid from virtue. People act like, oh, just because I think something should be allowed or something should be, something shouldn't be illegal, something shouldn't be illegal, that doesn't mean that I can't call it out for the immoral unvirtuosity of the act itself. Is that a word? Unvirtuous? Disvirtuous? Someone hook me up. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll young people, right? 60 million abortions this generation has had and overseen. Yeah, 60 million. Broken families from no-fault divorces, right? And, of course, thousands of drug overdose deaths. If it feels good, do it. That was their ethos. They carried it over into adulthood. They favored short-term pleasures over long-term responsibility. This is the mindset, right? Again, it is a generation. It is not everyone in this generation who holds these views. There are people outside of this generation that hold these views. But look at the average age of these astroturfed protests. Look at this little... I hesitate to say the words that I want to say. Make America intelligent again. You could see this guy has definitely got the most mid-range IQ you've ever seen. Intelligence is in the eyes. Here, it's in the facial expression. You can see it here, right? Make America intelligent again. He thought that he was intelligent just by wearing the hat. Boomers dominate the Tesla protests. They rage against cuts to their entitlements. The elderly presence at these rallies, look at them. They don't want to fix Medicare fraud. They'd rather bankrupt the nation than lose a dime. And as you can see here, these people have no concept of anything outside of a movie, right? Their whole concept, right? Because many of them abandoned church, right? And if you think that's ironic, to hear someone like myself say that, note that I do have a moral compass. Note that I do behave, I believe, in a virtuous manner. But in this way, these people, they never picked up a moral code, right? They didn't read Ayn Rand, right? They were just told that Ayn Rand was evil on television, and so they believed it. And now they watched a movie, Lord of the Rings. They didn't read the book. And they believe that they are good people. They are doing good things out here, destroying the legacy of the United States and taking away the rights and the liberties of their children and their grandchildren as they spend us into oblivion. And it is because of their desire for immediate gratification. 60 million abortions. It's about convenience, right? They don't want to be inconvenienced by the babies. They want no fault divorce. They don't want people to be held responsible for the voluntary contracts that they enter into. It doesn't matter if there's kids involved, who cares? Destroy the husbands, destroy the fathers, disincentivize men. Look at this. You can tell, again, intelligence is in the eyes. It's in the facial features. You can spot an intelligent person to some degree. If you're another intelligent person, you can spot it, right? It's not a 100% thing, right? But you can see here is a man who is cucked. You can tell that here is his balls, this man's balls on the left is in this woman's purse, right? If she carries a purse, right? That might be another sign of the patriarchy. She probably carries a wallet and wears pants every single day. Good morning, pineapples. Floby Tenderson, I've listened to Atlas Shrugged last week. We are literally living it, man. Yes, and I'm livid.
This Doge administration is doing, the destruction of government by Elon is what we call it. This is a national day of action. It's called a Take Down Tesla Day of Action, so that we can speak up and out about how just horrible the policies are of this administration against people of all kinds, basic, ordinary people that depend on their Social Security, their Medicaid, their Medicare, and feel very scared and threatened by the decisions they're making, chopping jobs, just cutting so many jobs from veterans and National Health Institute of Health workers and all kinds of people just losing jobs, and they're scared. Science researchers that we depend on to do research for people to live with cancer so that they don't die. Many people will die from these policies. They're just really, really destructive.
Yeah. Boomer policies ballooned the national debt past 120% of GDP. Past 120% of GDP, the national debt, while birth rates have dropped below replacement levels. We've got a future labor shortage that is going to creep up on us, and we are going to be SOL, right? The entitlements are massive, and we aren't allowed to hire whoever we want in this country. We have to submit to the populists when it comes to labor laws and immigration, what this whole fight is over our economy. It's not just about cutting government employees, right? If it were just about cutting government employees, if we were doing what, in other fucking words, if we were just doing what Javier Milei was doing in Argentina, we would be much better off. Can we please get a shout out to Javier Milei? I'm reading this morning. I don't want to get off too much on the international news, but I'm just saying, we have got to take a lesson from someone who took a lesson from us back when the United States still believed in freedom. That's Javier Milei. Argentina. I mean, they're turning a corner. Their economy is on the rise. Hold on. I got to pull this All right. I mean, we are actually starting to turn our economy towards what Argentina was, right? Peronism, right? If you don't know what that is, I'm just trying to pull up the best data that I can for you guys. Now give me bullet points. I wasn't prepared to talk about this topic from this, but I can with my new artificial intelligence assistant who can help me to break things down for you guys so that you can get all the stories I want to talk about, but make sure I stay up on this. Now, Joni, she's calling BS. She says, boomers are some of the most responsible people I know. This is the old guard of socialist liberals, and they are literally dying. Now, Joni, I want you to be careful talking about it as a generation because I know I'm using it interchangeably, but I do want you to know that when I'm talking about boomerism, I'm not just talking about the generation. I'm talking about the mindset as well. So I don't want my boomer friends who are watching the show to be upset with me too much. You can be a little bit, right? But we had to tolerate decades of millennial abuse. The last 2 decades have been nothing but pooping on millennials and how terrible we all are, right? As we've slowly become the poorest generation. We're the first generation of people. Now I'm talking about it as a generational thing. We are the first generation who are actually going to be worse off than our parents' generation. Thanks. Oh, we're not supposed to be upset about this? We're not supposed to talk about cutting entitlements? We're not supposed to talk about cutting Medicaid? First of all, Trump isn't talking about cutting Medicaid. He's not talking about cutting Social Security or Medicaid or retirements. These are lies. These are lies when you first wrote them. They're lies. The Republicans don't want to cut your Medicaid and Social Security. I do. That's me. I do. Come. I want the attention. Give me the attention. I want to cut the Social Security and the Medicaid benefits. We don't want to hear any barriers, right? We don't want to. We don't want to claw anything back that they've stolen from us. No, it's all it is just it's civil asset forfeiture. We'll call it civil asset forfeiture. You collected more than you paid in. You collected more than you paid in. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. You could drop them in the comments, of course, but I'd love to hear on the text lines your thoughts at 573-319-1586. That's 573-319-1586. I hate it when I do that thing on my phone where it's you do it in, it does dual screens. Who wants to use that on their phones? Good morning, Pineapples. I'm Austin Peterson. Welcome to the Wake Up America show. Click the like button, of course, if you haven't already, and join us every Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 a.m. Central Time. Here's the bullet points here from the Javier Milei piece. So economists predicted Milei's libertarian policies would cause economic devastation and a deep recession. Guess what? It didn't. Argentina, when Javier Milei took over, 200% inflation, 40% poverty, a 15% GDP fiscal deficit, a growing public debt, a bankrupt central bank, a shrinking economy, decades of Peronist mismanagement, right? Evita Peron, right? The Perons, right? I mean, Argentina was a global laughingstock. It was a joke. If you invested in Argentine bonds, it was considered to be the worst investment in the stock market. Turns out that it paid off better than the best of American stocks, the best of American bonds. Argentina. If you made the dumbest investment move ever 5 years ago, it turned out it was the smartest investment in the world. What did Milei do? Immediately cut ministries from 18 to 9, then 8 within a month. Reduced spending by 30%. Actually reduced spending. Oh, Argentina, their president has more power than ours. Okay, I know, I get it. I'm just talking about what is the right thing to do. Can we just establish what is the right thing to do, right? Before we all start tearing each other to the treasure, before we eat the young boomers, can we please talk about what is right and true and good and moral and virtuous and beautiful? Virtuous and beautiful. Reduced spending by 30%. First monthly budget surplus in over a decade. Fired 37,000 government employees, eliminated 100 secretariats, subsecretariats, over 200 bureaucratic departments gone. Right? Good. Sounds good. Just like what we're trying to do here in the United States if the judges don't get in our way. Right? He passed a scaled back omnibus bill, even though the legislature was resisting him. He achieved the most aggressive one-year fiscal consolidation ever recorded, ever. Vetoed spending increases to maintain his fiscal credibility. Goldman Sachs reported on this. Deregulation, liberalization, the good liberalization, the one that America is running, like we're in so many ways, we are running so fast in the opposite direction, away from the Javier Milei playbook. In some ways, we're following it, and in other ways, we're following Bernie Sanders. In other, I mean, you know who the most popular politician is right now? It's Bernie Sanders, right? The biggest fucking idiot, right? The dumbest politician. The stupidest of us are the most popular, right? It's you know what it is? It's just high school. That's all it is, right? We need to put free soda machines. I'm running for class president. My name is Bernie Sanders. I'm 17 years old. I'm running for class president. And there should be free soda machines in the everywhere, and the boys can go in the girls' locker rooms. I'm vote for that. He's a wild man. Let's vote for him. Elections, do they even matter? This is the world we live in. We are ruled by the dumbest. Austin, why do you stay in politics? You know, you've had all these painful years and challenges. Austin, how have you stayed in this for so long? I refuse to be ruled by my inferiors. I will not go quietly to the good night while bartenders and gay race communists take over my beloved America. This is America, damn it, and I love it, and I'm fighting for it. I may not be anywhere near the hero that my grandfather was when he actually did fight in World War II, but I'm sure a lot more heroic than the boomer generation, which has decimated my generation. The devouring of the youth has got to stop. It stops with my generation. You know, all those millennials that we clapped all over? Yes. What are your thoughts on that? Nathan in the chat, Brad Beckman, Mr. Embry, Luke Sacker, we continue to grow. Hit those like buttons. Hit those like buttons. Hit those likes. Hit those likes. So I'm reading this article from someone over at the Heritage Foundation, and he's talking about the problems of boomerism, how the national debt has ballooned past 120% of GDP. And I will say it again, I'm talking about boomer mindsets, not just the generation. I know it's confusing, but two things can be true at once. The 1983 fix by the greatest generation of Social Security was temporary. The Social Security Trustees 2024 report projects that the trust fund depletes by 2035, 10 years. That will then cut benefits by about 20% in 10 years, unless it's addressed. Now, boomers have been in power since the 1990s. Now I'm talking to the generation. They haven't acted to fix this. It's 10 years away, and we are getting ready to see a sincere downgrade in the living capability of these senior citizens. And what's going to happen? Are they going to fix this problem? Right? Where are they going to get the money from? Right? They won't even allow us to cut the fraud, the waste, and abuse. There were people who were double, toil and trouble. There were people who were double billing Medicaid in different states that they had moved, and the billing was still, they were getting double billed. Who was getting the money? Where was the money going? We can't cut the waste. We can't cut the fraud. We can't cut the abuse, despite dozens of hours, by the way, of clips that I've played on this show in the past weeks. Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Bill Clinton, Al Gore talking about the waste, talking about the fraud, talking about the abuse. Chuck Schumer talking about cutting the waste, cutting the fraud, cutting the abuse. But here's the thing: the reason why they're hypocrites, of course, is they're not hypocrites because they never intended on doing it back then. It was all just a shell game. But now that there are people in government like Elon and a few others, not many, but a few others like Elon, who actually do want to cut government, who actually do want to follow through with the conservative playbook, despite many on the right who are actually standing in the way of doing this as well. And I'm not just talking about, the old boomers of the old coalitions in the old days that don't want, they don't want their retirement benefits taken away. I'm talking about people who are ideological Marxists, right? They're Elizabeth Warren, but they go to church on Sundays, standing in our way of making sincere and valuable cuts to government and government spending and government entitlements and government and Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. They're standing in our way. Medicare and Medicaid hit $1.6 trillion in spending in 2023. That is 40% of all healthcare spending. They don't, but they're focused. They think that they're Star Wars characters. They think they're in a movie. They have a picture of Leia Organa, Rebel Princess, on their shirt. So they think they're heroes when they casually joke about committing property crimes. Look, I'm so brilliant, right? I have nothing to do with I divorced my husband, and my kids hate me and wish that I hadn't abandoned them, and the 3 other kids that I had aborted. Fire fascism is when I can't destroy the generation below me. They, them, Zazer. Hi. Doge is stealing from us. You see, when you stop the gravy train, when you stop allowing them to steal from us, say that, then Doge, that's theft, right? That's the way that the government operates. They think that it's like have you ever heard the phrase, whenever you make a tax cut, somebody says, how are we going to pay for that tax cut? Right? That's because they don't see tax cuts as our money. They see the tax cuts as the government's money, that it's owed to the government or that it belongs to the government, right? So that's why you say, that's whenever you're in, any swamp, and here I am in Jefferson City, Missouri, that's why you will hear them say, we need to find a way to pay for these tax cuts. Right here in Missouri, we're trying to abolish the income tax, and the politicians are all scrambling to find a new way to deal with the declining revenues. They need to find a way to pay for it, they say. So what are they looking at? They're looking at that sales tax, like, right? They want to raise that sales tax. Missouri's already got one of the higher sales taxes in regards to red states. We've already got a high sales tax. There's enough. We're taxed enough already. Tea party time. Yes. They're stealing from us.
They're like, I got the car before he was crazy.
We're paid by the Democratic Party to be here. Look at all of these liberal white women. They will sell our country. They will sell our country. They will sell out this country for $1.59. They will sell out this country if you offer them a McChicken. They would sell out this. I'll tell you what. Let me not undercut them. These are leftists. They will sell this country out for a Starbucks latte. Good morning, pineapples.
Good morning, pineapple. Looking very good, very nice. Good morning, pineapple. Looking very good, very nice.
Welcome to the Wake Up America show. I'm your host, Austin Peterson. If you haven't yet, please click that like button. Sorry you bought a Nazi car. They're passing out these flyers. Dogs, not Doge, handing out hot dogs. Would you eat a hot dog from someone who hates you right there? Sorry you bought a Nazi car. If somebody offered you food I wouldn't even care how good it looked. That doesn't look very good. First of all, what the hell have you done here to this hot dog? Sorry you bought a Nazi car. They say, why are we here? Okay, well, I was there because, like a lot of people, there to support Tesla. A lot of my friends are buying Teslas. I was having a conversation with my buddies over the weekend. Many of them are buying Teslas because they've been doing test drives, going to Tesla dealerships, doing test drives here. A lot of my buddies are going to be buying Teslas. Somebody's got, of course, the Palestinian keffiyeh there. The homos for Hamas. No EPA, no clean water. We have an EPA. How clean is the water now? R.I.P. Medicaid, oh God, I wish. Be the kind of Republican that the Democrats claim that you are. Medicaid cuts killed me. Good. Well, then you'll burn in hell. At least all the children you aborted will be in heaven and won't have to see you. Death by Doge bite. Listen, if Doge kills you, you deserve to die. Amen. Can I get an amen? What else do you have? Do you not have? That's the thing. They don't have jobs. And like Sign of Jonah said, paid protests. Mighty Megatron just got here. What's up, Mega? We're talking about all of these Tesla protests and the rise of boomers eating their young. The majority of these protesters seem to be of one age group. Boomers own 80% of homes. 68% of them won't downsize. Prices have shot up 40% since 2015. Most millennials are stuck renting, can't build wealth like boomers did when homes were 2.5 times annual income versus 6 times. Can you imagine what it'd be like to be able to buy a house at 2.5 times in annual income? All right. 2.5 times your annual income. And that's what you could buy a house for. Now it's 6. I mean, Stephanie and I, we were talking. Oh, we got some good news, actually. Oh, and thanks for all the Rumble Rants, guys, by the way. We do have an incredible bonus content video for you today. It's a little longer than usual, but it's a big subject. It's Mel Gibson having his gun rights taken away and the court cases involved, like in losing your rights for, you've committed a felony, or what are the crimes that you can lose your gun rights for. The Mel Gibson case is quite disturbing, and we've got a really cool bonus mini documentary that we have ready for you today, and it's a little longer than usual. You might want to help unlock it. If you do, with bonus content, you get to either make Rumble Rant donations, like several of you have. Thank you, guys. For those of you who have, or make purchases at forlibertyshop.com. That's the number for libertyshop.com. If you visit the shop this morning, you're going to see lots of cool stuff. We're having so much fun with the new image generation tools that ChatGPT has given us. Check out this cool little graphic that Stephanie made. Did I already lose it? I didn't think I closed it. Hold on. We've been making like these infographics, and let's see. I've been doing like libertarian infographics. And oh yeah, check this out. This is awesome. So people were really like ripping into me. First of all, I didn't make this graphic. Stephanie did. But when we posted it over on Facebook, people were like, "You're a pedo. Ugh, these girls aren't 18." First of all, they're not real, okay? And second of all, Stephanie made it, so she's the pedo. Stephanie, no, she's into young girls, I guess. Gulf of America. This is our #1 seller right now. And what we did is now we can take our products and we can say, put them with like some cute girls on the beach, and then you get that, right? That's what Stephanie made the graphic, guys. But I mean, here's the thing. Can you really, is it, first of all, they're fake. So how do you know they're not all on? They're all quadruplets who had today's their 18th birthday, gentlemen. Go get them. They're all yours. It's AI, okay? I actually just think it's really cool. And then she also made this Calvin Coolidge ad for our Calvin the Coolest President book, which I think is really cute. Here's Calvin reading his book. You could get a copy of Calvin the Coolest President for the young freedom fighter in your life at forlibertyshop.com. That's the number 4libertyshop.com. Go to forlibertyshop.com and grab yourself a copy of our children's book. And let's see what else. We had one other ad. Oh, yeah, this was really nice. You know, the pine tree flag, the origin of the pine tree flag. Had George Washington actually had a hand in creating it, the Appeal to Heaven pine tree flag. And look at this. I said, make a graphic about Austrian economics in the style of Thomas Hart Benton, who is the painter that did the walls in the Missouri State Capitol. Beautiful paintings. And this is what I came up with, where I think it's actually a really beautiful illustration that gives a basic summary overview of what it is that people who believe in liberty believe in when it comes to economics. Economic value is subjective. I mean, if you have a diamond in the desert and you'd rather have a cup of ice cold water, if you are on Diamond Row in New York City, you'd rather have a diamond than a cup of water because of subjective value. Human action is purposeful, sound money restrains inflation, and government intervention harms. ChatGPT. Pretty cool, huh? There we go. They're all 20 years old. But anyways, they're not real. They're not real. You go to forlibertyshop.com, guys. Help to unlock the bonus content. Somebody just did that, as a matter of fact. Somebody just went to the shop and helped us to unlock the bonus content by making a purchase. Let's see what it was. Can we tell? Oh, yeah. It was a Don't Tread on Me beach towel. Nice. Those are also beautiful. We need to make one of those. But check this out. Economics in one lesson, summarized with a nice little infographic there from ChatGPT. The Candlemaker's petition, right? It's not perfect. It sometimes makes little mistakes, but I think I leave the mistakes on there just because, one, I'm lazy, and two, I think it's interesting for people to see what the limitations are too. The free banking era, a history of market-driven money, right? A little bit of the history of banking and free banking, what libertarians believe in regards to what would happen if we got rid of the Federal Reserve. You can do branded infographics. We see the Wake Up America show logo here, right? 5 things you shouldn't tell ChatGPT, right? Your identity information, medical results, financial accounts, proprietary corporate information, or your login. So pretty cool. Just doing my part to help educate the world, stand up for the values and the things that I believe in. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all these things and more. We're going to speak to Hannah Cox here in about 10 minutes. Some really bad swings on the economy for Trump in this new CBS poll. In January, 42% thought they'd, remember this is just polls, 42% thought they'd be better off under his policies on the economy. Now just 23% say they are, and 42% say they're worse off. Almost as many people are blaming him for inflation now as Biden. The longer that the Trump presidency goes on, the more people are going to look at the president and say, well, he's responsible for the policies of what is happening right now. That is why it is so important for us to call out the mismanagement of certain economic decisions that are being made that could negatively impact our electoral opportunities in the future, which is what this Bonchi character from Red State, this conservative, did, and got called out by the vice president. J.D. Vance actually came in and argued on X with a conservative, calling him a liberal because he thinks that maybe we should not, that reciprocal tariffs, right, if they are to gain advantage, leverage, if for the point of heading net zero tariffs, I'm for. But non-reciprocal tariffs, for whatever reason, up and down, left and right, that it creates the disequilibrium in the economy that has created the uncertainty that's led us to where we're at right now. But again, what do I know? I just have been studying this for 20, 30 years now at this point. Welcome to the Wake Up America show. Maybe we can centrally manage the economy. Maybe we can centrally plan things. Maybe socialism actually works. But it's just that the wrong people were in charge of it. Maybe we do need to give the woke right everything. Eric Weinstein, he was a prominent debunker of the COVID hysteria and leftist COVID tyranny, posted on X last week, said, things that I got wrong. When I first heard the term woke right, I frankly thought it was extremely dumb. Then I thought it was a minor issue. Then I thought it was absolutely the wrong name for a real thing. Then I thought even if it is the right name for the real thing it discusses, we should still call it something else. Then I just thought, well, sometimes James Lindsay is still pretty annoying. I don't love eating crow in public, and I never said any of this on the record, so I can get away with not apologizing, but I was wrong. Sorry, James. For reasons both unbecoming and mysterious, I seem to underestimate you on a regular basis. My bad. James Lindsay said we're already at the point where we're wondering which mainstream conservative institutions can survive attacks by the woke right and still don't believe it exists. Either we reject it soon or it destroys conservatism, MAGA, America, and most of your kids. What do you think? We'll talk to that about that topic with I.G. Hayworth. How on earth? Would love to hear your thoughts on this. Some good news, guys. Guess what? No more internet problems in just 30 days. I can make you a man. After 3 long years in this house, after the deal with the studio when we had to have fast internet, and then I brought it home, I took a huge risk that this 5G that we've been using will be able to stream, and Stephanie can do her job, and we can upload clips and videos and run a media business from home. And that looking perhaps as a dubious prospect, and Stephanie and I thinking maybe we have to move because we don't have fast internet. We have been told we are getting high-speed internet. Oh my God, you guys, you have no idea what this does for us. It changes so much for us and our family because we were seriously considering moving, trying to find a new house because the nature of this podcasting business and uploading social media content and working with AI and producing video and documentary work and working online, creating just a simple thumbnail sometimes for the shows can take forever. Uploading the audio podcast can take like 30 minutes for an MP3 file. So, I mean, we're lucky we can stream. As we're streaming right now, I have to dial the settings down to the lowest settings so that we don't, so that we don't lose the feed. But thankfully, for those of you who know the past of the Wake Up America show, the last 3 years of everything that we've done building this show, the internet has been a big challenge, and finally it will be fixed. Yeah, I've been streaming in 5G. Fiber. It's coming up in about 30 days, and I'll be able to crank up all the settings, 1920 by 1080p, full fast bit rate. We're just going to double clock. We're going to turn this operation into an enterprise. We're going to speak to Hannah Cox about all these topics and more when we get back. We're going to talk about the economy, stupid. How we win elections by winning the economic game. It's all about freedom. It works. Limited government, the Department of Government efficiency on steroids, Argentina, Javier Milei, Austrian economics, all that. When we get back with Hannah Cox on the Wake Up America show.
Are you tired of the strange radioactive effects of leftist culture? Do you ever wonder what happened to good old-fashioned American values? Well, fear no more, because there's a new force fighting back against the cultural rot of today. Introducing Culturama, a right-of-center talk show that's taking back the future today. Hosted by none other than blonde bombshell herself, Daniela Pensack. She's not just talking, she's taking culture back. With sharp takes, brilliant guests, and a few surprises along the way. Tune in to the live video podcast twice a week, because the future doesn't have to be weird. It can be Culturama.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
I think that at the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than
well, that's the fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that. He's a libertarian.
And always has been.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything.
What is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation.
Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
The conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.
Do you hate the deep state? Do you reject the Antichrist in all his ways? Do you believe that aliens controlled LBJ to assassinate John F. Kennedy? Did you know that the shot can put chemicals in you that will make you more sensitive to 5G? Do you love America? Do you want more freedom? Do you like smoking hot red-headed libertarians? Then the AP for Liberty shop is for you! Check out all the awesome new merch and have a happy new year! Fight the deep state, reject the Antichrist. Visit AP for Liberty shop and get your patriotic merchandise now, or the deep state wins.
We're not joking about a third term, about possibly wanting a third term. Does that mean you're not planning to leave office on January 20th?
I'm not looking at that, but I'll tell you, I have had more people ask me to have a third term, which is, in a way, it's fourth term, because the other election, the 2020 election was totally rigged. So it's actually sort of a fourth term in a certain way. I just don't want the credit for the second, because Biden was so bad, he did such a bad job. And I think that's one of the reasons that I'm popular. I think I'm popular because we've done a great job. I think we've had the best almost 100 days of any president. And most people are saying that.
Okay, yes. I mean, listen, I've been very excited. Welcome to the Wake Up America show, guys. A lot of the things the Department of Government Efficiency is doing Fantastic. Want to see more of it. Elon Musk, baby, on the right track. Third term of Donald Trump? Don't think so. Prefer to keep the Constitution as it is. I'm a big fan of term limits. I know a lot of people aren't. I like the idea of term limits, right? But I'm already concerned about the next election. Listen, I've been fighting for liberty for 20 years. I've seen politicians come and I've seen politicians go. But for me, I stand strong on liberty, whether it's popular or whether it's unpopular. That's what I believe in. The Constitution. Economic liberty is a big part of that. But even that has fallen out of vogue on the right. I'll tell you, my next guest, Hannah Cox, joins me live right now from Athens Media. We're so glad to have Hannah here joining us live today. You're looking fantastic. Hannah, nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Hannah, we're both, I mean, you could say economic conservatives, but as we know, conservatives, they don't really have a good track record of being economically conservative. So maybe just call us fiscally libertarian. But I guess I wonder what your thoughts are. The Republican Party used to talk a big game about free markets and about limited government, but they didn't do it. Now they're not talking about it and they're not doing it. Which was it better to have the old Republicans who at least they talked about limited government, they talked about fiscal conservatism, but they didn't do it? Or now we have Elizabeth Warren on the right, and that's what I mean, to contend with. It's kind of weird.
I mean, that's actually a very thought-provoking question, Austin. I call myself a rabid capitalist because I've long recognized that capitalism is sort of a hunted agent, both on the left and the right. I think one thing I complained about for many years, though, is that because Republicans were paying lip service to these notions, not just of capitalism, but of limited government and individual liberty, and then not doing it, it was kind of giving them a bad name. On the left, like when you would talk to people, especially younger people, they would say, well, we've tried capitalism, or what the Republicans are doing is capitalism, and that's had all of these problems. And they would be 100% correct about the problems that they were identifying, because what was being done was not actually capitalism, was not actually limited government. So I found that very frustrating, and I think it was harmful to those ideas and the ability to discuss them and talk about them and really have like actual debates around them because of that. I don't know if it will be better now that they are openly hostile to these concepts on the right or not. I mean, I guess it at least gives us the opportunity to really push back on what the right is truly doing and have frank conversations. I'm a big fan of having frankness and bluntness and open dialogue. So perhaps it'll be better, but I guess it is concerning recognizing the open aggression that many Republicans now have towards things like capitalism. I think it does mark a real change with where their base is. And when you've got neither of the two coins fighting for these things, I think we're really up a creek, and that will be much more expedient if they're both working towards what are ultimately progressive ideas of how economies should run and how a government should function.
Well, and my concern here is that there's a lot of distractions that are that the right is throwing up. And listen, I think in terms of tactics, fighting something like the Gulf of America, like that, because it takes so little time and energy, and the left, ties themselves up in knots fighting that battle, which I think really ultimately doesn't matter. That's the kind of distraction that I can see myself saying, okay, yeah, it makes sense. The Democrats are wasting time fighting that battle while you go after the main chance, while Elon is doing his thing, for example. But the Greenland thing, it's the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. Two things can be true at once. One, I can make a consideration of like the tactical question involving Greenland, and then also say maybe we shouldn't be spending so much time like trying to provoke conflict with many of our allies like Canada and Denmark and Europe per se, as bad as Europe might be getting, because it's a distraction from the things that got Trump elected in the first place, which was to restore the damage done to the economy over the Biden years. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I think that we're quickly becoming an island to ourselves, which is a dangerous position to be in. I think that some of the agreements that we've entered over the past couple of decades are worth examining. It's been worth looking at if we're getting a raw deal. I think that Trump was really right in some of those areas, talking about how we're paying for the world's defense and how, we're getting the short end of the staff. When you look at things like the Paris climate agenda, looking at how much of the tab we're expected to pick up, even though we are far better on climate issues than the vast majority of others in the world. I mean, it's actually crazy how much further ahead and how much more we do versus other countries. And yet we're having to pick up the tab and reduce our own quality of life, and others aren't. I mean, those are valid conversations, and he stuck to that, I think, I would be able to like really cheer him on and get behind large swaths of this administration. But that's really not what we've seen happen. We've seen him picking fights and placing tariffs that aren't even retaliatory and going after friends. And even when it comes to things like Greenland, I would say, and having lots of conversations over the years leading up to this current term, the vast majority of people that I spoke with who voted for Trump voted for him for three main reasons. The economy was absolutely top of that list. I think there was a lot of people who were voting as a repercussion to what happened during the COVID era. It was a blowback to all the censorship and the shutdowns and the lockdowns and just the oppressiveness of the Biden administration during that time, and the left in general. But I would say third on that list, and very close behind those two things, was the perception that Trump was going to be an anti-war president. And I think that is a huge gain across the American population since I was a kid, where the vast majority of people recognize that the very aggressive foreign policy that was carried out by our country for decades has been ruinous and problematic and led to blowback and has hurt us economically. And they felt like that was gearing up, and it was under Biden. And so they wanted Trump because they thought that was their best chance for peace, both in the Ukraine-Russia conflict and in the Israel-Palestine conflict. We really haven't seen that much progress on either of those fronts. And at the same time that he has not really made progress on those fronts, he's now stirring up tension, not only through trade wars, which often lead to real wars, but also through things like what's happening in Greenland. And I'm with you. There's a case to be made that we have actual strategic interests there, but those should be pursued diplomatically and peacefully. There's no reason that we should have to go about it the way this administration is approaching it. And I think that that's going to likely create even more conflict and also probably stir up conflict with others who also have strategic interest in Greenland. So I'm really very pessimistic about much of what's happening right now, and I think it's unfortunate, and I don't think it's what people voted for.
No, it's definitely not what people voted for. I voted for Elon Musk. I voted for Doge. I voted for the good things that are being done in regards to the Department of Education. And, you could quibble about, executive orders, and we could talk about, the proper role to do, but the president, I think, makes a wise decision in the way he writes his executive orders by always stipulating cutting these agencies, which were created by Congress, to the maximum extent allowed by law, which, is a fight. Frankly, Hannah, I thought that no matter what Trump did, here's the thing, even if Trump did something that was perfectly within his purview, completely and totally constitutional, the other branches of government would step in and block him from doing it just because that's what they do. The first administration was rife with that. They used the Russia collusion hoax, the Steele dossier, and put barriers in his way. Now, this time, they're just going to use judges on the court that were elected by Obama to try and stop him doing something. Even if it were totally constitutional, legal, what have you, if it's the right thing to do, they're going to try and stop him from doing it, which is why I think on many of these things, he should just go ahead and try and do it, like the cuts to the Department of Education, which I know is a big issue for you, and I think something we definitely celebrate. The foreign policy question, I'm glad you bring that up, because I do think that, if a lot of the Trump's supporters sour on him, it would be from that, just because there is a lot of skepticism about the United States spending billions of dollars in the war in Ukraine. There is a lot of skepticism about the United States spending more in the conflict between Israel and Hamas. And I think a lot of Americans are rightfully questioning whether or not it's really a best use of our tax dollars or our military to be involved in those conflicts. And that's an excellent question, and it's one that I think can and should be discussed. But on the economic question, and this is what I brought you on here to discuss today specifically, Hannah, J.D. Vance, our vice president, he seems to have a lot of time on his hands. He's attacking this conservative writer from Red State, calling him a liberal because this character, Bonchi is his name, he was, I think, gently criticizing the administration for their economic policies, which is causing chaos in the markets and which is affecting the economy. I know that the administration wants to get interest rates down, but it's coming at the expense of a lot of people who, how do you get people to retire, or federal workers to retire, if you're destroying their retirement accounts? So JD Vance calls him a liberal for saying, hey, maybe we need to focus a little bit less on Greenland, a little bit more on the economy. That's a conservative talking point. What's liberal? I guess you mean, do you think J.D. Vance was saying that he's classically liberal, or was J.D. Vance trying to call him a liberal while attacking him from the left, which makes no sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think JD's politics are all over the place. I mean, honestly, they're a hot mess. He's had a wide range of opinions he's held since he entered the public eye, and that wasn't all that long ago. And, I'm all for people encountering new information and changing their minds and recognizing they were wrong on a certain front. I've done that, and I think that shows intellectual humility. When somebody like JD Vance comes out and changes all of their opinions at once, that's sus to me, though. I don't really see that as a sign of intellectual humility. I see it as a sign of ladder climbing and just doing what's expedient to advance the fastest for your own pocketbook and power. So I don't have high regard for JD Vance anymore, and I think he has currently adopted a very left-wing mentality when it comes to economics, when it comes to how he is approaching politics, and I think when it comes to how he thinks he will ascend after Trump. I think he really wants to play into this like blue-collar, Rust Belt, very Joe Biden, politics book. And so I do think he was attacking him from the left. I also think there is a problem on the right now, very tribalistic sort of mentality, where if JD Vance or Trump calls somebody a Democrat or calls them a liberal, most of their base just takes it as truth. They don't question that. They don't actually look at the policies that are at play. I thought that criticism of JD Vance was, a very light one. I thought that the way he responded was absolutely insane. He seems to spend a lot of time on Twitter and yet be very thin-skinned. But the Red State writer was absolutely correct. In J.D. Vance's retort, when he tried to attack him, essentially, he tried to blame things like capitalism and free trade for manufacturing and for jobs moving overseas, which is just absolutely asinine. And I refuse to think somebody as smart as J.D. Vance, and I do think he is smart, is that ignorant of basic history and basic political deals that have happened throughout the decades. I mean, just a cursory overview of the 1900s would show you that it was a very progressive mentality that took hold in our government, especially during the FDR years, but it continued to be perpetrated in many presidents after FDR, that were very protectionist, very much carrying out the union's bidding. They did a lot of things to heavily regulate various sectors to increase the price of labor on behalf of unions, because that's the only way unions can get you higher wages, is to force the cost of labor up for people in those sectors while hurting people outside of them. And that's exactly what they did. And ultimately, they shot themselves in the foot because it became too expensive to even employ the unions, which were particularly saturated in manufacturing and in factory jobs. And so those jobs got pushed overseas. This is a 1 + 1 = 2 historical equation. And so to try to gaslight people and say that capitalism and free trade is why we ended up where we're at now, I think is a huge slap in the face to anybody paying attention. It really shows Americans.
Well, what there is what they're doing is they're taking advantage of morons. Is what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
They're taking advantage of people's economic ignorance, right? Because in economics, to you and to I, if you've read economics in one lesson, right? If you've spent any time, like with Adam Smith or with if you've spent any time at all with any of the Austrian economist books, right? Hayek or even many of the modern ones like George Selgin or some of the others, right? If you spend any amount of time with it, you'll see how it's 1 + 1 = 2. But so many times coming to some of these solutions, it is rather counterintuitive. And so what you do is you play on you take Bernie Sanders' playbook and you play on people's envy and and you point the fingers at the wrong people, right? Because quite frequently, of course, people like Bernie Sanders, they don't want people talking about the millionaires, right? Because, of course, Bernie is a millionaire, right? It's the billionaires. They want to demonize a group of people that's easy to hate rather than, and that's why you'll find, we're going to have a conversation with Ian Howarth about the woke right, but you'll find a lot of scapegoating these days on the right of like Jews or, of different groups, national, ethnic groups, for example, for the problems that we are facing in our country. Vivek Ramaswamy, he got canceled because if he had said those things and been a white man, nobody would have cared. But nobody wants to hear an economics lecture from a swarthy Indian man who, they say is an anchor baby and who's coming and bringing ideas of capitalism and free markets, or at least a form of libertarian nationalism that is much closer to what you and I believe than what Bernie Sanders is advocating for. But the Republican Party, I've said for the last few years, has started to become some kind of a twisted version of Elizabeth Warren, but it goes to church on Sunday. In other words, right, it's all they hate Ben Shapiro because of his quote, "Facts don't care about your feelings." Capitalism doesn't care about your feelings either. The laws of supply and demand, you're gonna create a black market for these goods anyway, and then all you're doing is undercutting the people who are in the legitimate market too, by driving them out of jobs and then driving their wages down even further, because you're not legitimizing so many of the a tax, which is what a tariff is, all it does is outlaw all of the transactions that would have occurred on the margins if the price would have been for a percent lower, because every penny that is an increase in a price, especially an artificial increase, every penny that comes in that is increased, a certain 100 people, 200 people, 300 people won't make that purchase because of that price. But these aren't the kinds of things that aren't going to make great campaign speeches. If we point fingers at people, we point fingers at ethnic groups. If we scapegoat people, that's what's popular. That's what works. That's why populism is so dangerous. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. That's the populist playbook, right? Never blame the actual people that are doing things wrong, because that would be the government. But populists are sort of, whether they're on the left or right, what J.D. Vance and Trump are saying right now about government is pretty similar to what Ezra Klein at the New York Times is saying about government, right? Like, government has failed. Yes, it's done these bad things, but it's not because government in and of itself is a problem. It's not because we as politicians are the bad guys. It's because the wrong people have been in control of the power, and we just have to get the right people in there and do the right things, and then government can be this force for good. And you shouldn't be mad at government or the politicians. You should be mad at the greedy people out there trying to take advantage of you, which is why capitalism is such an easy scapegoat on both sides, because in many people's minds, it represents the moneyed class, the wealthy. So that's what they're using to attack the wealthy versus themselves. But when you look at the Trump and J.D. Vance type agenda, particularly when it comes to the economy, it's very similar to exactly what the left would be doing if they were in power right now. I mean, Joe Biden himself kept many of Trump's tariffs in place and also increased tariffs. The media didn't ring the alarm during his administration because they didn't care as long as he was doing it. All of a sudden, they're big free market, free traders now that Trump's in power. But the agenda is the same. And ultimately, what is going to happen is that they are going to push more jobs overseas. That's what's actually mind-boggling about this, is if you look at, let's take the wedding industry, because I'm knee-deep in wedding ceremony planning in Austin. As you know, I'm already married, but we haven't had our ceremony yet. We're doing it in September. So I've been wedding dress shopping and picking out venues, and wedding dresses are one of the areas that are getting hit by these tariffs. And so the wedding dress shops, which tend to be small, locally owned, female-owned, by the way, they are getting hit really hard because all of a sudden these products that were already very expensive are jumping up hundreds of dollars. So what's going to happen is that fewer and fewer people will be able to purchase those wedding dresses, and ultimately those independent small shops will close, and those jobs will either go extinct or they will move overseas, which is already where most of the wedding dresses are being made because it's too expensive to pay the labor to make them here. So this is a very predictable pattern of what will happen. And I just think it is so sad that the vast majority of the American population has been so fundamentally screwed by our education system and not educated in the basics of economics and how they've been applied historically to recognize how predictable this is.
Do you appreciate the irony that 10 years ago leftists were scolding us all for not buying Teslas, not buying electric cars, and now they're all scolding us for buying them, and now Republicans are scolding us for not buying Teslas because that's the car that's mostly but not entirely manufactured in the United States, and now the Republicans are the ones who are scolding us for not buying the Tesla. They've swapped. The parties have, remember the parties switched? They have switched, but it's just been in the last 5 years with all the Democrats have come in.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it really is wild to watch. We saw a Tesla in front of us in traffic the other day that had a little bumper sticker that said, "I bought this before I knew Elon was crazy." I mean, it's interesting to me because, again, the guiding principles are completely unmoored on both the left and right. And I think the parties have been shifting since a little bit before Trump's first election, and I don't think they fully finished that yet. So we'll see where they end up. But everything is very much in flux right now. For the left to say they care about the climate and then be out burning the number one EV car manufacturer's products in the U.S. and making them a target is wild. You're sacrificing, in their minds, what I would think would be the greater good because you don't like the owner of this product. And then on the right, they claim to not care about climate change, and they've kind of thumbed their noses at EVs, and now they're all rushing out to buy Teslas. And just, it's all so superficial and surface level. It's not really grounded in anything. And I I don't know, maybe I'm just like a homeschooled weird libertarian nerd, but I find that very frustrating, these whims and these shifts back and forth where it just seems like a lot of grown adults have no idea what they actually believe and are very easily emotionally manipulated by their political system.
Man, I don't know how it is that you and I avoided the mind viruses. I think for you, it's a little easier to say, yes, probably because you were homeschooled. But for me, I went through the public education system. I got a liberal arts degree, but I just never swallowed the bullshit from left or from right, because liberty is center, true north. Hey, Hannah, what are you working on these days? I gotta run to my next segment, but I want to give you a chance to plug for our audience anything that you might think that they need to know.
Yeah, well, some of it, Austin, I've been busy working to create a guerrilla warfare campaign online to actually get pro-capitalist individual liberty agendas across the finish line. So we have already managed to get school choice done in Tennessee this year. We're now working in Texas to get universal school choice there. We're working to get the REINS Act passed in about 15 different states, which if you're not keyed in on that yet, guys, look it up. It's very exciting stuff, very much related to what's happening with Doge, but at the state level, it gives us an ability to actually restore constitutional powers and cut the bureaucrats' power, and that's something to pay attention to. We're also trying to kill a very corrupt union-backed bill, corporate welfare package in Wisconsin called right of first refusal. So if you're on the ground there, pay attention to that and let us know at Athens Media if you've got other agenda issues we should focus on and help fight. We are ready to go to war and help get good stuff across the finish line, whether it's coming from the left or right. As long as you're pro-capitalist and pro-individual liberty, we will work with you.
There we go. Hannah Cox, we appreciate you very much.
Thanks, Austin.
Have a wonderful day. We appreciate Hannah Cox. All right, guys, make sure you follow Hannah as well over on X at Hannah Cox. We appreciate her joining us live this morning on the Wake Up America show. Woke left. I think most people are familiar with what the woke mind virus has done to many of the people in this country that we consider to be on the left. But is there such a thing as a woke right? Is there a woke right? Well, James Lindsay has become quite a controversial character these days for calling out what he calls the woke right is now being canceled by many. He used to fight the woke left and everybody wanted to be on his side. Now he's a terrible, destructive atheist that is trying to take down the right because woke right is not a thing, and we need to cancel James Lindsay apparently. But Ian Howarth, he's got a take on this. He's going to join us live here in less than 5. Don't go away. We're going to talk about the woke right when we get back on the Wake Up America show on the 4 Liberty Network. Tired of spending your hard-earned money on woke corporations that don't share your pro-freedom values? Fed up with sipping liberal lattes and progressive cappuccinos? Introducing Founding Flavors from AP for Liberty Shop. Get your day started with Washington's Revolutionary Roast. As robust and principled as the man himself, this blend is the shot of energy heard round the world. Or maybe you want to taste the fervor of freedom with Adams's Patriotic Perk. It's as dynamic and balanced as the U.S. Constitution, sure to awaken your spirit of liberty. For the aficionados, we've got the Jeffersonian Java, a complex mix of flavors that speaks volumes about your refined tastes. And don't forget Betsy's Liberty Lullaby, our decaf option, crafted with the same care and dedication Betsy Ross put into our Star-Spangled Banner. This blend lets you enjoy the taste of freedom anytime without losing sleep. No woke beans here, folks. Just pure, patriotic, pro-freedom flavors brewed with love for liberty. So why compromise your principles for a cup of coffee? Stand up for your values, perk up your patriotism, and start your day the American way. Get your founding flavors at apforlibertyshop.com.
Are you tired of the strange radioactive effects of leftist culture? Do you ever wonder what happened to good old-fashioned American values? Well, fear no more, because there's a new force fighting back against the cultural rot of today. Introducing Culturama, a right-of-center talk show that's taking back the future today. Hosted by none other than blonde bombshell herself, Daniela Pensack. She's not just talking, she's taking culture back. With sharp takes, brilliant guests, and a few surprises along the way. Tune in to the live video podcast twice a week, because the future doesn't have to be weird. It can be Culturama.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
I think that at the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than
well, that's the fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that. He's a libertarian, and
always has been.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything.
What is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation.
Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
The conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.
Do you hate the deep state? Do you reject the Antichrist in all his ways? Do you believe that aliens controlled LBJ to assassinate John F. Kennedy? Did you know that the shot can put chemicals in you that will make you more sensitive to 5G? Do you love America? Do you want more freedom? Do you like smoking hot red-headed libertarians? Then the AP for Liberty shop is for you! Check out all the awesome new merch and have a happy new year! Fight the deep state, reject the Antichrist. Visit AP for Liberty shop and get your patriotic merchandise now, or the deep state wins.
Welcome back to the Wake Up America show. It's time to rise and freedom. Glad to have you here. Click that like button if you haven't already, and the follow button if today is your first time on the Wake Up America show. We're going to talk about a topic that's been lighting up conversations across the political spectrum, the woke right. It's a term that's intriguing, and it's very divisive. It sort of blends the social awareness that's typically tied to the left with the conservative values of the right. But what does it really mean? Is there a genuine shift in ideology that's happening? Is this a strategic rebrand or just another buzzword meant to stir the pot? And why is it sparking so much debate? Help unpack this. We've got a fantastic guest joining us, Mr. How Earth. He is a sharp voice in the conservative space who's not afraid to to tackle the big questions. Ian Howarth joining us live. He's going to break it down for us. Good morning, Ian. Nice to see you, sir.
Morning, Austin. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so what is woke right? And what is the controversy surrounding this? Is this a real thing, or is this just a ginned up word in order to make, political enemies of a certain person angry? How do you define it? Is it real? Tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, I 100% think it's real. I wrote a piece for the Washington Examiner a couple of months ago, I believe, basically saying the woke right is here and it's real, and we need to deal with it. So if we look at what woke means, woke originally came out as kind of, as you said, just a way to claim social awareness, right? I am awake to social issues. But it quickly became like a label that was used by the right as kind of an attack on so-called wokeness, where people on the left would be obsessed with identity politics, they'd be obsessed with DEI, they'd be obsessed with transgender nonsense. And so it was kind of like a catch-all term to basically say, oh, you're a radical leftist in some way, oh my God, you're so woke. And then if we look at what's happening on the right, what I mean by the woke right is basically people who have taken all of the strategies and in many ways the ideologies of the woke left and have just put an American flag on it essentially and said, oh, I'm a conservative now. And so you see an obsession with identity politics in exactly the same way, usually a mirror image of the left's identity politics. So an obsession with so-called whiteness, an obsession with Western, well, not even Western, purely whiteness in many ways. There's an obsession with lying, of taking history and completely rewriting it in the same way 1619 Project rewrote American history. We see people rewriting American history. We see people rewriting Western history, for example, twisting World War II and Winston Churchill being the terrible guy and Adolf Hitler being a misunderstood kind of guy. And then also you see what brings these two sides together is often just an obsession with anti-Semitism that if you scratch beneath the surface on almost every single argument, you see the Jews coming up. So that's kind of how I define the woke right. There's obviously a lot of debate. Some people use it as a different term. But I think it's important to start this conversation. That's how I approach it.
Okay, it makes sense, right? I mean, some say that the woke right is just conservatives borrowing tactics from the left to stay relevant, right? Or maybe it's something deeper, right? So what's an issue that you think that is causing the rise of the woke right? Where do you think this is? What is driving this push for identity politics on the right, whereas it's mostly been the domain of the left before? Where's it coming from?
Well, I think a lot of it is really human nature. We look at why the woke left was so successful, at least for a short amount of time, is they played into things that are like base caveman level thought. Right, it's an obsession over tribe, an obsession over we're good, the other side is bad. That's always been there in politics, but I think with the rise of social media and things like that, it's become very easy. And so I think you've got a lot of people who claim to be conservatives, claim to be right-wingers, claim to be libertarians, all of these groups, but then don't actually believe in the ideology. It's just the team they've chosen to try and take over. And so I think a lot of the people who I would label as woke right aren't really on the right. I think what they're doing is they're just trying to get clicks, they're just trying to get attention, they're just trying to get a following. That's the area they've decided upon. If they could be as successful or more successful pushing another set of ideas, I think they would. And so I think that's where it's coming from. I think it's a complete disregard for actual belief systems, because you see a lot of these people are often hypocritical. They'll criticize Russia until suddenly Russia is great. They'll criticize Iran until suddenly they think Iran is great. They don't actually have any set of beliefs. A lot of it is just for attention. And unfortunately, identity politics is built on really the failure of the human mind, the inherent tribalism we all have to fight against. And so I think that's why it's so successful, is because it just goes back to basics. It goes back to obsession over skin color, obsession over where you're from. And I think that's really not what America is about. And it's a pretty dangerous path we're treading when we see both sides, I wouldn't say dominated, but there's a large crowd on both sides who are pushing this kind of idea that I think is really dangerous.
Well, here's what I think the critics would say, and I wonder how you would respond to this, because we're talking about ethnic identity and tribes and race, so it's always a loaded conversation. But because you and I sort of meeting on the middle ground here and discussing these things, coming from different backgrounds, I can tell you what my experience has been as a 44-year-old man, and that is have been dealing with, and growing up in the United States, as opposed to yourself, right, is that the anti-white racism from the left has, I believe, contributed to the rise of the woke right in many ways. And what I think, of course, a lot of this is shrouded in anti-Semitism. You wonder if the Jewish tribal solidarity, the ethnic solidarity that the Jews enjoy, why can't that apply to whites in a form of identity politics, right? Because it would appear as if many people who are members of tribes, you yourself, you're part of a tribe, right? If you're African American, then you get to be a part of a tribe. But it has felt my entire life, and I haven't fallen into the trap of identity politics, but I see anti-white racism when I know it when I see it, is that we do often get told, oh, well, don't have ethnic solidarity from people who have ethnic solidarity. How would you respond to that, what I believe to be a valid criticism, Ian?
Yeah, I mean, I think a few things to unpack there. One, I think the idea of Jewish solidarity is laughable when you have Jews across the political spectrum who can't agree with each other on really anything. And so I think a lot of that is often an assumption that there is some kind of solidarity on all these levels. I think that's to some extent what Trump really blew up during this election, is that there's an assumption of ideological solidarity along racial lines that simply doesn't exist. But I think you're also absolutely correct that there's been a scourge of anti-white racism for years in the West generally. It's a thing in the UK, it's a thing in Western Europe, and it's certainly a thing in the United States. But it's possible to say that is wrong without therefore mirroring it by reversing it on yourself. I think, for example, talking about culture is absolutely fine. I think we can talk about American culture, British culture, Western culture. But I think the fact that those people were white isn't intrinsic to that culture, because you've got a lot of, for example, roots in the Roman Empire. You've got a lot of roots in Judeo-Christian belief that wasn't necessarily quote-unquote white. And so I think the obsession with race kind of misses the point, is that I think we should absolutely be celebrating our culture. Our culture is the best in human history. The idea that America is not the greatest country in the history of the world, I think anyone who disagrees with that needs to open a history book and actually understand the reality of human suffering and the amazing things that the set of beliefs put together by the people who created this country really understood. And so I think you can say all those things. It's not a white thing, though, in the same way that so-called African-American solidarity, I think you can have some kind of core cultural understanding. But I think the moment you cross into the racial stuff, it's like celebrating Kamala Harris as an icon of African-American progress when she's literally not African-American. We're focusing on the tribalism rather than the culture and the beliefs and history and all those kind of things. So I think for me, it is a blurry line. It is a fine line. But I think sometimes people miss the wood for the trees by trying to mirror what the other side is doing rather than focusing on the amazing culture America has. If we just focus on that, I think that's a way we can actually grow. And I think by focusing on race, I can understand the idea of like, well, people are celebrating, for example, Asian culture, so why shouldn't I be able to celebrate white culture? Well, I would ask, what is white culture? Because you have different white cultures. There is no such thing as Asian culture, really. There is no such thing as white culture. There should be a thing as American culture. I would rather focus on that. I think that's much more positive and lives in the real world in many ways.
I do. I would too, Ian. As a matter of fact, I'd love for the United States to be that individualistic culture, because I like the concept of focusing on a person's merit rather than their particular religious or ethnic group. But without, I mean, we'll never get rid of tribalism entirely, because to do so would be to destroy religion. It would be to destroy Jewishness. It would be to destroy Catholicism, right? And so conservatism, to some extent, which desires to adhere to traditions and hold to important traditions that have been handed down, it has this collectivist mindset, which is inextricable from conservative views, right? So it leads towards a natural collectivism in the sense that it believes that by maintaining the traditions of these collective groups, that we can build a better civilization or better society. So in some sense, like, these ideas are sort of at odds with one another. And that's why I think there's a bit of a distinction between libertarians, who are the true individualists, and conservatives who still believe in like conserving traditional values, which have been housed within these tribal and ethnic and many times racial identities. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, my answer to that would be that there will always be tribes, but it very much matters over what we become a tribe. And I think becoming tribes over racial issues is silly. I think becoming tribes over ideas, where the American idea is the best idea in the history of humanity, is a good idea. And so I think it's natural for people to be in tribes because it's natural for people to group together. If we were a purely individualistic society, nothing would really work, nothing would really happen. We have to interact with each other. We have to move forward on a set of beliefs. And so I think moving forward on a set of core beliefs that underpin Western culture and specifically American culture is the way to go. I think by doing that based purely on race, your skin doesn't give you a set of ideals that we can move forward with. We just happen to look the same. But then, of course, you come to the anti-Semitism issue of there are many people who do not believe Jews are white. So where do I fit in this grand white supremacist view? It's really laughable. But if we're talking about ideas, you can certainly find out what my ideas are. I can find out what your ideas are. We can decide whether we agree or not and whether we can build our tribe together. But if membership is purely defined based on how much melanin you have, I think that's a very silly starting point. So I definitely don't disagree that we're tribal inherently. There's some elements of tribalism that are bad. There are some that are good. And so I think it really depends on what we become tribes over.
Well, I guess I'm confused myself then perhaps in how to have some of these discussions because of my own heavily individualistic nature, how to approach some of these problems that we face. So, for example, one of the favorite topics that people will like to bring up, specifically the woke right, but not just the woke right, conservatives in general, many libertarians, is the racial lines on which befall the statistics regarding violent crimes in this country. And I don't know how we have a conversation in this country that tends towards individualism while looking at FBI crime statistics, which show that a certain minority in this country tends to, per capita, commit a higher percentage of violent crimes. How do we address that in individualistic terms while dealing with a problem that appears to point towards one ethnic, racial collective?
Well, I think you can make the point that's been made before, which is it's indicative of perhaps a cultural problem or a region of where people live problem that often is also linked to race because people of different races tend to live together. I think it's perfectly reasonable to say there are higher crimes in black and minority areas because it's statistically true. It is not racist to point out reality. It is also not racist to point out that maybe certain cultures that are usually linked with certain skin colors have issues that others do not. None of those are issues. I think the problem is the intention behind it. And quite often you have people who are making these points because they want to actually address the problem and solve the problem, or at least have suggestions to how to solve the problem. And then there are others who are saying, look, these statistics prove my assumption that, say, black people are more violent as individuals, which is not the case. You can make arguments about groups based on all kinds of different statistics, but if you're talking about individuals, I think you erase the individuality of each person who happens to be black by pointing to these statistics. And so I think for me, it's the intent and how these statistics are raised, but we can actually absolutely have a conversation about those things because it's statistically true. It's like, for example, when people talk about Jewish people in Hollywood, I have no problem with you saying that Hollywood is in some ways dominated or there's a statistically higher proportion of Jews in Hollywood. That's not anti-Semitic to say. It is anti-Semitic if you're using it as justification for your argument that Jews control the media or all these kind of different things, because you can say, well, yeah, Jews created Hollywood because they weren't welcome in any other industry. So when you go and create an industry, you can't then be blamed for that industry.
Let's see, I think that's the problem for me. It was the same with the money changers, right? It was it during the Dark Ages? You know, now everybody says, oh, the Jews and the money changers, but that was the only job they were allowed to have.
Yeah. If you let them do normal jobs, they would have done normal jobs.
Yeah.
But again, it's the double standard of anti-Semitism that comes out in 1,000 different ways.
Right. So it really, the woke right, what it is it's rejecting the presumption of liberalism. And when I say liberalism, I mean good liberalism. Right? The individualism that you and I are talking about. What the woke right appears to, or at least purports to be advancing is the idea that Western nations really are not the greatest nations, that the Axis powers that were represented, the push, the desire for ethno-states and nationalism that puts the collective über alles, over all of us, right, to destroy liberalism and individualism, that was the proper way to go. That after World War II, that the United States should have imposed a moral order in a Catholic nationalist American view. So a sort of an uber nationalist view, rather than to go into what, the world that Tucker Carlson and his favorite the best historian ever that he has said, which is the post-World War II consensus, which did not serve the interests of the American people. In some sense, if you're going to pull a grievance, I've been talking this morning about the boomer generation and the destruction of the West by a generation, not necessarily the people of that generation so much as the mindset, which has infected people. Boomerism is not just tied to a generation now, it's much more of a mindset. But what the woke right, if it is a thing, rejects is a post-war consensus of things like individualism and ethnic neutrality, right? They say that the true right has always opposed things like individualism, liberalism. Well, I guess you might just call it freedom.
I think also you're giving them almost a bit too much credit here as well, as I think for a lot of them, a lot of it's just contrarianism. A lot of it is just there's a lot of distrust in the so-called truth. I think a lot of that after COVID was perfectly justified. There's a lot of distrust in so-called experts. And I think there are people who are running with this and were saying, well, what can we get other people asking questions about? The so-called I'm just asking questions. There's no problem with asking questions. The problem when you keep asking questions when we have the answer is the issue here. And I think a lot of people out there just will say that Nazi Germany was good and Winston Churchill was bad, simply because it's not the mainstream viewpoint, and you get attention by saying things that are against the mainstream. Sometimes that's a good thing because you're actually exploring ideas in good faith, and sometimes you're just trying to get clicks. It's exactly the same way with Tucker Carlson going to Russia and drooling over Russian supermarkets and the fact that if you convert dollars to the Russian currency, things are cheaper if you have an American salary and an American income. And there are just things like that of people intentionally trafficking in ignorance because they're trying to target a part of the audience that will lap that up. And so I think, yes, there are parts of it where people are rejecting liberalism and all the things you mentioned. And I think there are also some people who are just scraping the dregs of online communities simply because they're trying to get attention by saying outlandish and outrageous things. I think it's a combination of both, and it's a problem I don't think people online are really equipped to handle yet. I think this is a new problem that we're
quite tempting because you can see the playbook laid out ahead of you by people like Candace Owens and others, right? Just make an outrageous accusation like, Macron's wife is really a man, get him, make your $1 million and then move on. Whereas, if you really believe in something and it's countercultural, right? The real counterculture now is to be libertarian or to be conservative and the thing that really just irks me, and I'll leave you with this, is when like you'll have like a MAGA person like JD Vance calling a conservative like Bonchi over at Red State a liberal, attacking him from his left on economics, and then calling him a liberal while coming from the left. I guess this is the playbook I get for many of the woke right, is that we're the liberals despite the fact that they're the woke right. I mean, like that they have more in common with the left than they do with us. But they're attacking us from the left while calling us like liberals, but not in the liberal way, because I don't think they really know what the real word, origin of it means. But I mean, is this what we're doomed? Is this the history that we're doomed in repeating, Ian?
Yeah, I think unfortunately so. I think a lot of this is also who you choose to elect. The fact is, J.D. Vance is not a stupid man. J.D. Vance knows exactly what he's doing. J.D. Vance knew what he was doing when he called Donald Trump Adolf Hitler, and now he knows what he's doing when he's Adolf Hitler's running mate and second in command. And so I think when you have someone like J.D. Vance come and attack someone from the left by calling them a liberal, he knows exactly what he's doing. He just knows it's effective. And so I think it's up to us as a movement and up to us as voters to look at this and actually decide, is this person actually genuine in what they believe? Or are they just saying what they need to attract their base? And I think J.D. Vance is going after the Tucker Carlson base. It's all the same strategy. And so I think it's something we need to work out how we are going to fight, because we need to fight it. Otherwise, we're going down a very dark path.
I agree. Yeah. I don't know what it is. It's just I'm completely incapable of like bringing up morons. I always go out there and try and find the smartest group of people that there is to try and put together for my community so that they'll be healthy and be special forces for liberty. And that's probably what's keeping my community small. I need to go out there and I need to say a lot of stupid shit that gets people inflamed and angry and play on their grievances and hatred for one another so I can make $1 million and retire. Ian, you're a syndicated columnist. You're out there everywhere these days, and we always love your point of view, and are grateful that you get up early and share your thoughts with us. What are you working on right now? What would you like to share with our audience before we go?
Yeah, thank you as always for having me. I'm working on just a bunch of columns right now trying to talk about tariffs and the impact on the actual issues that Donald Trump said he was going to fix. Started working on my book as well. I'm excited to share more about that in the coming months. So yeah, you can follow me on all social media, IG, HAWORTH, and you can follow all my work there.
That's right. And if you have trouble spelling, just remember How on Earth sounds like How on Earth. Ian Howarth, HAWORTH. We love seeing him here on the Wake Up America show. Thank you for being so generous with your time. Have a great week, Ian.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.
But the hard things, the places where we are prone to disagreement, say politics and religion. Well, as it turns out, not only does Wikipedia's model work there, it actually works really well. Because in our normal lives, these contentious conversations tend to erupt over disagreement about what the truth actually is. But the people who write these articles, they're not focused on the truth. They're focused on something else, which is the best of what we can know right now. And after 7 years of working with these brilliant folks, I've come to believe that they are onto something, that perhaps for our most tricky disagreements, seeking the truth and seeking to convince others of the truth might not be the right place to start. In fact, our reverence for the truth might be a distraction that's getting in the way of finding common ground and getting things done. Now, that is not to say that the truth doesn't exist, nor is it to say that the truth isn't important. Clearly, the search for the truth has led us to do great things, to learn great things. But I think if I were to really ask you to think about this, one of the things that we could all acknowledge is that part of the reason we have such
Gulf of America t-shirts available at forlibertyshop.com. We just, Steelbringer, you unlocked the bonus content, dude. That was it. That took us over the $75 goal because the purchases at forlibertyshop.com. People love the beach towels. It's time, guys. Get yourself a big, fluffy. Look how gigantic these towels are here. Look at this. They're huge. Can't wait to take mine to the Gulf of America. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the show today. Send us a text at 573-319-1586. Exit through the Grift Shop at forlibertyshop.com. That's the number 4libertyshop.com. Enjoy the bonus content. You guys unlocked it. We'll see you right back here again tomorrow on the Wake Up America show on the 4 Liberty Network. A former public defender who was appointed as the Justice Department's pardon attorney in April 2022, says she was fired last Friday because she refused to sign off on a recommendation to restore Mel Gibson's gun rights. The movie star and director, who supported Donald Trump in the 2024 presidential election and was recently designated as one of the administration's 3 ambassadors to Hollywood, along with Jon Voight and Sylvester Stallone, lost the right to own firearms because of a misdemeanor domestic violence conviction. Oyer presents the episode as a conflict between public safety and political favoritism, and the New York Times framed the story the same way. But the incident also illustrates how difficult it is for people who have lost their Second Amendment rights as a result of criminal convictions, a category that includes the president himself, to regain those rights, even when there are no grounds to think they pose a threat to public safety. In March 2011, Gibson pleaded no contest to a misdemeanor battery charge involving his girlfriend, and Los Angeles County Superior Court Judge Stephanie Sautner sentenced him to 36 months of probation. Although Gibson's deal with prosecutors allowed him to avoid jail time, his plea triggered an ancillary penalty under 18 U.S.C. 922G9, which makes it a felony for anyone who has been convicted in any court of a misdemeanor crime of domestic violence to receive or possess a firearm. Another provision of the same law, Section 922G1, sweeps more broadly, imposing the same lifelong disability on anyone who has been convicted of a crime punishable by more than a year of incarceration, no matter how long ago it was committed and whether or not it involved violence. As Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett noted in an opinion she wrote as an appeals court judge, the constitutionality of the latter prohibition is doubtful. Barrett dissented from a 2019 decision in which the U.S.
Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit upheld the application of Section 922J, Xiaofi 1, to a manufacturer of therapeutic shoes and footwear inserts who had pleaded guilty to mail fraud. History demonstrates that legislatures have the power to prohibit dangerous people from possessing guns, she wrote, but that power extends only to people who are dangerous. The Supreme Court's 2022 decision in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin added heft to that argument by clarifying that gun control laws must be consistent with this nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation when they impinge on conduct covered by the plain text of the Second Amendment. In 2023, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit ruled that Section 922G1 failed that test as applied to Brian Range, a Pennsylvania man who had pleaded guilty to food stamp fraud, a state misdemeanor that was notionally punishable by up to 5 years in prison. Based on similar reasoning, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit last year overturned the Section 992G1 conviction of Stephen Duarte, a California man who had lost his gun rights because of a nonviolent criminal record. Without such judicial intervention, prohibited persons like Range and Duarte have little recourse. Under 18 U.S.C. 925C, they theoretically can ask the Attorney General to restore their Second Amendment rights. The Attorney General has the discretion to do that based on a determination that the circumstances regarding the disability and the applicant's record and reputation are such that the applicant will not be likely to act in a manner dangerous to public safety, and that the granting of the relief would not be contrary to the public interest. But that responsibility has been delegated to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, ATF, which Congress has barred from considering such applications. Although federal law provides a means for the relief of firearms disabilities, the agency explains, ATF's annual appropriation since October 1992 has prohibited the expending of any funds to investigate or act upon applications for relief from federal firearms disabilities submitted by individuals. As long as this provision is included in current ATF appropriations, ATF cannot act upon applications for relief from federal firearms disabilities submitted by individuals. If the ATF cannot act on such applications, can people with disqualifying criminal records seek relief in federal court? No, the U.S. Supreme Court unanimously ruled in the 2002 case, United States versus Bean. That case involved a firearms dealer, Thomas Bean, who in March 1998 drove to Nuevo Laredo, Mexico, for dinner with 3 associates after visiting a gun show in Laredo, Texas. Before crossing the border, Bean asked his assistants to remove the guns and ammunition he had in his SUV, but they overlooked a box containing 200 rounds. Bean said he did not realize that the ammunition was in the car or that driving into Mexico with it was a crime. He nevertheless was convicted of illegally importing ammunition into Mexico and sentenced to 5 years in prison. Bean was transferred to a Texas prison that September and released the following month. Although he ended up serving just 7 months of his sentence, the conviction meant he was no longer allowed to possess firearms, a disability that was especially burdensome in light of his occupation, and especially unfair given the nature of his offense. But when Bean asked the ATF about restoring his gun rights, he was told the agency was not allowed to consider his application. And since there was no agency decision to challenge, the Supreme Court concluded, Bean could not ask a judge to restore his rights either. Given that situation, people with disqualifying criminal records have little hope of regaining their Second Amendment rights. Generally speaking, the only way they can do that is by obtaining a state or federal pardon, and the odds against that are long. Which brings us back to Mel Gibson. A couple of weeks ago, Oyer told The Times, she was assigned to a working group charged with identifying people who deserve to have their Second Amendment rights restored, despite criminal records that made it illegal for them to own guns. It was an unusual assignment for the Office of the Pardon Attorney, which typically handles requests for clemency and recommends candidates for pardons or commutations, The Times notes. By way of explanation, it says the project has been championed by some on the right who maintain that not all people with criminal convictions are dangerous or deserving of such a ban. Contrary to the implication of that gloss, critics of this policy are not limited to right-wing gun nuts. In Duarte's case, for example, the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, noted that Section 922G, Quar 1, is an extraordinarily broad statute that does not target dangerousness or propensity to commit violence. The ACLU said the government had failed to show that the provision's categorical application to people convicted of nonviolent offenses is consistent with our history and tradition. It added that the law is a major contributor to mass incarceration and disproportionately impacts people of color. Even a left-leaning organization that is not known for defending the Second Amendment, in other words, can see there is something screwy with permanently taking away people's gun rights when they have no history of violence based on crimes, such as growing marijuana or selling drugs, that may not even involve an identifiable victim, let alone the use or threat of force. Oyer herself evidently sympathizes with that critique. The Times reports that she came up with a list of 95 people she considered worthy of consideration, made up principally of people whose convictions were decades old, who had asked for the restriction to be lifted, and for whom Ms. Oyer's office thought the risk of recidivism was low. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche's office whittled the 95 candidates down to just 9, the Times says. Blanche's underlings also suggested an addition. They sent it back to me saying, "We would like you to add Mel Gibson to this memo," Oyer told the Times. To Oyer, the Times says, that request was worrisome on multiple fronts. While the other candidates had all undergone a significant amount of background investigation to measure their likelihood of committing another crime, that was not true of Gibson. Giving guns back to domestic abusers is a serious matter, Oyer said, and is not something that I could recommend lightly because there are real consequences that flow from people who have a history of domestic violence being in possession of firearms. Oyer also was vaguely aware of a highly publicized episode in 2006 when Mr. Gibson was caught being verbally abusive and anti-Semitic to a police officer who had stopped him on suspicion of driving under the influence and recorded at least some of the exchange. She ultimately decided that she could not in good conscience recommend restoring Gibson's gun rights, a position she says resulted in her dismissal. Like Oyer, I have no idea whether Gibson still poses a threat that justifies barring him from owning guns, and the way his case was treated is unseemly, to say the least. But it is certainly true that millions of Americans, probably including the 86 candidates whom Blanche's office nixed, all of whom Oyer thought posed no such threat, have lost their gun rights for no good reason. And that injustice is compounded by a congressional dictate that effectively nullifies the promise of potential relief for people deemed unlikely to act in a manner dangerous to public safety. Trump's own disqualification from gun ownership underlines the irrationality of this policy. He lost his Second Amendment rights based on 34 felony convictions that involved falsification of business records. Although he received no formal penalty at all for those offenses, they still triggered Section 922G, Tro 1, because they were theoretically punishable by more than a year in prison. The upshot is that a man entrusted with control of the nation's vast military might, including its nuclear weapons, is not allowed to own a gun, which makes no sense no matter what you think about the legally dubious case that resulted in those convictions. While the loss of that right might not matter much to someone with armed, taxpayer-funded protection, the same cannot be said of ordinary people who are legally barred from possessing firearms, even though they have never done anything to suggest they are inclined to violence. The scandal of Gibson's special treatment pales by comparison with that travesty.
Tired of spending your hard-earned money on woke corporations that don't share your pro-freedom values? Fed up with sipping liberal lattes and progressive cappuccinos? Introducing Founding Flavors from AP for Liberty Shop. Get your day started with Washington's Revolutionary Roast. As robust and principled as the man himself, this blend is the shot of energy heard round the world. Or maybe you want to taste the fervor of freedom with Adams's Patriotic Perk. It's as dynamic and balanced as the U.S. Constitution, sure to awaken your spirit of liberty. For the aficionados, we've got the Jeffersonian Java, a complex mix of flavors that speaks volumes about your refined tastes. And don't forget Betsy's Liberty Lullaby, our decaf option, crafted with the same care and dedication Betsy Ross put into our Star-Spangled Banner. This blend lets you enjoy the taste of freedom anytime without losing sleep. No woke beans here, folks. Just pure, patriotic, pro-freedom flavors brewed with love for liberty. So why compromise your principles for a cup of coffee? Stand up for your values, perk up your patriotism, and start your day the American way. Get your Founding Flavors at apforlibertyshop.com.